Hey everyone. I don't usually talk about things like this, but I can't keep quiet anymore. It's a heavy one, and it's about my dad. Of course, if you can call him dad. For most of my life, my dad wasn't a father. He was my chief critic, my bully, and the source of most of my anxiety. From the outside, we probably looked like a normal family. He had a decent job, my mom tried her best to keep the peace, and I was just a quiet kid. But behind closed doors, it was a different story. The trouble wasn't always screaming matches or anything you could easily point to. It was a slow, constant drip of humiliation and belittlement that chipped away at me, piece by piece. This is the story of how I finally reached my breaking point and how I got, let's call it, creative revenge. It's not a happy story for a long time, but it ends with me finally finding my voice. Maybe someone out there going through something similar will listen this and know they're not alone. Buckle up, because it's a wild ride. I guess the first real memory I have of it wasn't some huge event. I was maybe 7 or 8. I'd spent all afternoon building this ridiculously complicated Lego spaceship. I was so proud of it. It had all these weird wings and I'd used every single piece I could find. I ran to show my dad when he got home from work, my little hands clutching this fragile, blocky thing. He didn't even really look at it. He just glanced down, gave this sort of sigh like I was bothering him, and said, "You built it wrong. The wings are uneven. Don't they teach you symmetry in school?" Then he walked past me to get a beer from the fridge. That was it. No. Cool build, son. No. Good job. Just immediate criticism about something that, to an 8-year-old, was perfect. I remember just standing there in the hallway, holding my spaceship, feeling this hot wave of confusion and shame. I didn't understand why it was wrong. I just knew that something I loved was suddenly stupid because he said so. That was the first crack in the foundation. I learned that day that my joy was an inconvenience to him, and my accomplishments were never quite good enough. That Lego incident became the blueprint for, well, everything. It was never just one big, dramatic explosion of anger. That would have been almost easier to understand. Instead, it was a constant, low-grade humiliation. He'd mock me at the dinner table if I struggled to cut my meat. "What's the matter, your wrist's made of spaghetti?" he'd say, and my mom would just look down at her plate. If I brought home a test with a 98%, he'd point to the 2 missed points and ask, "Why not 100? Were you daydreaming again?" He had a nickname for me that still makes me cringe. The disappointment. He'd say it with a laugh, like it was some hilarious inside joke, but his eyes were always cold. I started to make myself small. I'd stay in my room, I'd avoid talking at dinner, I'd try to become invisible. But that became a problem, too. Then he'd call me Shadow or Ghost, and complain that I had no personality. It was a no-win situation. I was either too much of a failure or not enough of a person. There was no version of me that was acceptable. The weirdest part, the part that messes with your head the most, was how he acted in front of other people. When we had company over or were at a family barbecue, he'd do a complete 180. He'd throw his arm around my shoulders in a way that looked affectionate, but was actually him digging his fingers into my collarbone. He'd say things like, "This is my boy. He's a little quiet, but we're working on it." Or, "Gotta keep an eye on this one, he's got a mischievous streak." In this jolly, fatherly voice. Everyone else would see this engaged, slightly exasperated but loving dad. They'd laugh and tell him what a great job he was doing with me. Meanwhile, I'd just be standing there, frozen, feeling like a complete fraud. It taught me a terrible lesson, that what was happening at home was a secret I had to keep. That nobody would ever believe me because the version of him they saw was so convincing. It made me feel totally alone. I think I was about 15. He was on one of his tirades about my grades, specifically a B+ in algebra. The usual stuff. "You're not applying yourself, you're going to end up flipping burgers, do you even have a brain in there?" But this time, something in me just snapped. I was tired, I was hormonal, and I was just so fed up. I didn't yell, but my voice was shaking. I looked right at him and said, "Why is it never good enough for you? What do you actually want from me?" The room went dead silent. My mom stopped wiping the counter. My dad's face went through this weird transformation, from shock to anger, and then to this cold, calculated smirk. He didn't yell either. He just took a step closer and said, really quietly, "I want you to be better. But I'm starting to think you just don't have it in you. It must be a genetic deficiency from your mother's side." Then he just walked away, leaving me standing there feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. My attempt to stand up for myself had not only failed, but he'd found a way to insult both me and my mom in one sentence. I felt so small. That was the day I learned that direct confrontation was a battle I couldn't win. Later that night, I heard them talking in the living room. My mom, God love her, tried to gently bring it up. "You were a little hard on him earlier," she said. I pressed my ear to my bedroom door. His response was a master class in manipulation. He didn't get defensive, he got sad. He sighed this heavy, put-upon sigh. "Honey, you think I like being the bad guy? Someone has to be. The world isn't going to coddle him. My father was 10 times harder on me, and it made me who I am today. I'm just trying to toughen him up to prepare him. If I don't do it, who will?" He made it sound like this noble, difficult duty he had to perform. He framed his cruelty as love, as necessary medicine. I could hear my mom murmur something in agreement. He'd convinced her. In that moment, I realized the problem wasn't just him. The problem was that he had an answer for everything, a justification that made him the hero of his own story. And I was just the weakling he was doomed to try and fix. The big one happened my senior year of high school. I'd been working for months on my college applications. It was my escape plan, my one shot to get out and never look back. I'd gotten my first acceptance letter to a decent state school. It wasn't Ivy League, but it was mine. I was actually happy, a feeling I'd almost forgotten. I left the letter on the kitchen counter to show my mom when she got home. My dad saw it first. When I came downstairs, he was holding it. He didn't look angry. He looked amused. He gave that little smirk and said, "They'll let anyone in these days, huh? Must need the tuition money." Then, he did something I will never, ever forget. He casually folded the letter in half, and then in half again, and dropped it into the half-full sink of dirty dishwater. He watched it soak for a second, looked back at my completely shattered expression, and said, "Don't worry. You probably wouldn't have made it through freshman year anyway." Then he walked out. I stood there, staring at my drowned future floating in greasy water. The shock was so physical it felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room. And then the shock turned into something else. Something cold, and hard, and final. This wasn't just humiliation anymore. This was sabotage. This was war. For a few days I just went numb. I went to school, I came home, I went to my room. I felt like a ghost, just going through the motions. The anger was there, but it was buried under this crushing weight of sadness. Sadness that I would never have a normal dad. Sadness that my own father seemed to genuinely enjoy breaking me down. I think a part of me had always held out hope that he'd change, that he'd see me one day and just be proud. That soaked acceptance letter killed that hope. It was a clear message. My success was an insult to him. My happiness was a threat. I finally accepted that this wasn't about me being not good enough. This was about him. And if it was about him, then playing by his rules, trying to earn his approval, was a game I was designed to lose. The sadness was awful, but the acceptance was powerful. It was like a key turning in a lock. I was done trying to win. It was time to change the game entirely. The plan didn't come to me all at once. It started as a dark, simmering thought in the back of my mind. I knew I couldn't fight him head-on. He was bigger, louder, and had all the authority. A shouting match would just give him more ammunition to paint me as a disrespectful, unstable kid. No, my revenge had to be smarter. It had to be quieter. It had to attack the one thing he cared about more than anything else, his reputation. The flawless, tough but fair image he showed to the outside world. That was his armor. I needed to find a chink in it. I didn't want to hurt him physically. I wanted him to feel a fraction of the humiliation he'd spent years dishing out. I wanted the world to see the man I saw. And most importantly, I wanted to do it in a way where he could never, ever prove it was me. The perfect crime of petty revenge. I started watching him, not with fear, but with the cold focus of a strategist. I was looking for an opening. His biggest pride and joy was his lawn. Not like, oh, I enjoy gardening. No. It was his masterpiece, his kingdom. He would spend every Saturday morning meticulously mowing, edging, and fertilizing. He'd literally get down on his hands and knees with scissors to trim the grass along the sidewalk. Neighbors would compliment him on it, and he'd just puff out his chest. It was ridiculous, but it was his thing. I knew where he kept his premium, ultra-expensive grass seed in the garage. One Friday night, after everyone was asleep, I went out there. But I didn't take the seed. I mixed a massive bag of cheap clover seed right in with his precious grass seed. I shook it all up so it was completely blended. The next morning, he went about his ritual, none the wiser, sowing the mixed seeds all over his prized lawn. I watched from my window, my heart pounding, but not with fear. With anticipation. The first part of my plan was in the ground. Now I just had to wait for it to grow. Weeks went by. The lawn grew in lush and green. At first, he was thrilled, probably patting himself on the back for his amazing gardening skills. But then, little green leaves with a different shape started to appear. Clover. It started in patches. He'd stare at it, confused, then get angry and douse it with weed killer. But the clover was mixed everywhere, intertwined with the very roots of his grass. You couldn't kill one without killing the other. He'd spend hours out there, muttering to himself, getting more and more frustrated. The neighbors' compliments slowly turned into curious looks and then into poorly hidden smirks. His perfect lawn was becoming a patchy, weedy mess. He couldn't understand it. He'd blamed the brand of seed, the weather, the soil, anything but the fact that his own son had outsmarted him. It was a small thing, a tiny rebellion. But watching his confusion and quiet rage from my window, I felt a power I'd never known. I had struck a blow, and he didn't even know there was a war on. The game had changed. The lawn thing was satisfying, but it was minor. I needed something bigger. Something that would truly humiliate him in his own world. And then it hit me, his annual backyard barbecue. It was his biggest event of the year. He'd invite all his friends from work, our neighbors, basically everyone whose opinion he valued. He'd spend days prepping, bragging about his famous grilled ribs, and holding court as the ultimate host. It was the ultimate showcase for his perfect life. The plan formed perfectly. A few days before the barbecue, I helped him set up. I was the model of a helpful, dutiful son. And while I was carrying out a bag of charcoal for him, I accidentally knocked over a small, unmarked bottle of liquid he kept on his workbench. He freaked out, yelling that it was his secret rib marinade, a recipe he'd perfected for years. I apologized profusely, looking genuinely upset. What he didn't know was that the bottle I spilled was just water and brown food coloring I'd planted there the night before. His actual secret marinade, which I'd discovered was just store-bought sauce he poured into a fancy bottle to look gourmet, was safely hidden in the back of the fridge. I replaced it with an identical bottle I'd made, but I altered the recipe. Significantly. I kept the base the same, but I added a truly heroic amount of salt, and then, the secret weapon, a ton of sugar-free gummy bear syrup. The kind known for its laxative effects. The day of the barbecue arrived. The lawn was weedy, which already put him in a foul mood. But he put on his showman's smile and slathered my special marinade all over the ribs. The party was in full swing. Dad was holding court by the grill, flipping ribs and telling his same old stories. People were eating, laughing, having a good time. I just mingled quietly, eating the potato salad I'd brought and waiting. It started about 45 minutes after the main course. First, it was Mr. Henderson from next door. He suddenly stood up, clutched his stomach, and made a beeline for the house, his face a pale shade of green. Then it was my dad's golf buddy, Carl. He didn't even excuse himself. He just bolted from his chair and practically ran inside. A strange quiet fell over the party. Then, a low groan from across the table. It was like dominoes falling. One by one, guests were struck by a sudden, urgent need to find a bathroom. Our house only has two. The scene descended into pure, chaotic panic. People were sweating, looking desperate, and making hurried excuses to leave. The line for the bathroom was a nightmare of pained expressions and awkward avoidance of eye contact. My dad was just standing by his now empty grill, holding his tongs, looking completely bewildered and then horrified as his own stomach began to gurgle ominously. He tried to laugh it off, to blame a bad batch of potato salad. But the damage was done. His perfect party, his moment of glory, had turned into a literal disaster area. People weren't just leaving, they were fleeing, and they were not going to forget this. His reputation as the host with the most was in ruins. The next few days were quiet. The phone rang a few times. It was friends calling, not to thank him for the party, but to, well, let's just say they had some strong words about their post-barbecue experiences. My dad was mortified. He couldn't look anyone in the eye. He'd been utterly humiliated in front of his entire social circle, and he had no one to blame. He'd grilled the ribs. He'd made the secret marinade. He tried to blame the mayonnaise in the potato salad, then the store that sold him the meat, but the story was already out there. Dave's famous ribs were infamous for all the wrong reasons. The weedy lawn was now the least of his problems. I never said a word. I just watched the fallout from a distance. There was no yelling, no confrontation. He was too defeated, too embarrassed to bully anyone. The power dynamic in the house had shifted. He was no longer the untouchable king of his castle. He was just a man who had thrown a party that people would talk about for years, for the worst possible reason. I had won. Not with fists or screaming, but with quiet strategy. I had given him a taste of public humiliation, and it had completely disarmed him. I finally felt free. So, that's my story. I'm at college now, far away from home. I talk to my mom regularly, and she says Dad's quieter. I think the whole experience genuinely humbled him. We'll never be close, and that's okay. Some bridges are better off burned, or in his case, some lawns are better off covered in clover. I'm not saying what I did was the right thing to do. Revenge rarely is. But in my specific, messed up situation, it was what I needed to do to break free and reclaim my power. It wasn't about hurting him. It was about stopping him from hurting me. If you're in a similar situation, with a parent or anyone who makes you feel small, please know this. Their words are a reflection of them, not you. You are not the problem. Your worth is not defined by their cruelty. My advice? Get out as soon as you safely can. Create distance. Build a life you're proud of for you. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't about confrontation, it's about living a happy, successful life without them in it. For me, I learned that I was never powerless. I was just playing the wrong game. And sometimes the quietest moves are the most powerful ones. Thanks for listening.